And welcome back to Who Would Win. Today's Who Would Win for the week of the 12th comes to us from North Currency Collector 1867, if I got that name right, who asked the question, who won a fight, the Babadook, you can't get away from the Babadook, versus Bagul from the movie Sinister. So, both of these are supernatural boogeyman-esque figures. One is, okay, let's look at both of these guys real quick, because there's definitely stipulations and limitations these guys have. Bagul is a demon, a demonic entity of some sort. His real origin, I don't believe, is truly known. Of course, let me get Bagul up right now. I probably should have had that prior, but you know what? Hey, look, don't at me. Don't at me. Anyway, here we go. Bagul, to be specific, a symbol associated with the worship of a pagan deity, a very obscure one dating back to the Babylonian times, named Bagul, the eater of children. Crimes you're dealing with, they will have elements of missing children, correct? Blah, 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 blah. Bagul is a pagan deity from Babylonian times. He possesses his own realm and can travel into the moral world via images of himself. Basically, so yes, more or less, he is a demon of some kind. Now, obviously, being a demon means that in theory you could beat him with the right type of passages, holy items, whatnot. Now that being said, he his power and skill set is very vast, possessing dark powers. He particularly exerts influence over children, ability to travel through dimensional worlds through images of himself, be it on the TV, on the on just a picture, invisibility, telepathy, electronic control. What the hell is teletransportation? Oh, is that like okay. Hallucination, manipulation, shape-shifting, soul absorption, curse inducement, psychological tactics, darkness manipulation, death inducement, telekinesis, superhuman strength, and black magic. Due to lack of mouth, Bagul's voice is never heard, thus preventing greater insight into his personality. However, his centuries of family murders point to he's being bloodthirsty and sadistic. Bagul is only pleased and properly worshipped when he kidnaps his child accomplices into his netherworld, slowly consumes their souls. Basically, he's a corrupter of innocence. Really, that's what he's doing. He's also shown to adapt to the times, as shown by how he influenced the child's, and basically, from just pictures to films, all that. Bagul's abilities, though, Bagul is limited. Bagul cannot enter our world unless there are images of him. So if there is no available image, he's stuck in his own world. With that being said, should he make it out to our world, he is a very threatening deity, a very threatening force indeed. Yeah. Now, the Babadook is a very interesting case when you talk about versus matchups, because there is debate on whether the Babadook is in fact a legitimate supernatural entity, or whether or not this is all just a representation of the mother's psychosis, struggling with grief, struggling with everything. That we'll obviously deal with this versus as the let me rephrase the sentence. We'll obviously deal with this versus in the idea that the Babadook is a supernatural entity and not just the manifestation of a mother's guilt or anything like that. The Babadook seems to that being said, the Babadook does seem to select individuals, because when the mother and the son move into the house, the book is there. Now maybe the book was left over from the past individual who owned the house. However, it does seem to be that it does seem to be the Babadook does lean towards being an actual supernatural entity, as even after the mother destroys the book comes back and is reformed. The Babadook's abilities really aren't well defined. It seems to be able to move on its own volition. It moves very creepily, but it can just and by move on its own volition, I do mean it can kind of teleport to some degree. It's unknown whether this thing actually possesses supernatural strength, or if it's highly durable or not. Because really, what the Babadook is playing mind games, playing psychological games, and ultimately it leads to the possession of the mother, which then causes her to kill the dog and try to kill her own son. But ultimately, the Babadook is overpowered by them standing up and facing their issues together as a mother and as a family, basically. Now, the Babadook is not killed or destroyed. But it's left very weak and pretty much powerless in their basement where they feed it worms and such. It's like as very like it can still kind of move the bowl towards it like telekinetically, but that's about it. So in this fight, I mean, for me it comes off pretty obvious who would win this fight because the Babadook is just so poorly defined as to what the Babadook actually is and what the Babadook can actually do. Add on to the fact that, let's be honest, in Babadook, one second, I just want to actually get the Babadook's page up here so I can read off it. But what? Sorry, I saw it was like how the Babadook became an LGBTQ icon we didn't know we needed. Like, what? I'm like, I'm not arguing it. I mean, the Babadook is, I guess, somewhat androgynous, but whatever. Hey, to each their own. Mr. Babadook. Yeah, the problem is the Babadook is so ill-defined in terms of what it's actually capable of doing, that it is a bit difficult to judge the Babadook in terms of what it's actually capable of doing. But because we just don't see a lot of it. Like, what they list here for its abilities includes shape-shifting, which we see, manipulation, obviously, teleportation, telekinesis, possession, dark powers, sure, but it doesn't actually specify dark powers. Bagul's powers we have seen are definitely on the much higher end of the scale. Add on to the fact that the Babadook has been defeated. It was defeated by a mother and her child just standing up to it. It was defeated Pennywise style, for God's sake. Bagul's still at large within his universe. Like, no one has stopped Bagul. If I'm not mistaken, no one stopped Bagul. Trying to figure... in the alternate ending of Sinister 2, after Stromberg, the missing Professor Jones' replacement was smashing into a ham radio in his backyard. Probably knowing it will signal the coming of the wrath of Bagul upon him or anyone else. He drinks his coffee and later suddenly finds glowing green liquid inside his coffee cup, saying that happens in late elsewhere. Loses consciousness, a small blonde girl in a pink dress revealed to be the daughter, came into his room with a blunt hammer. Murder weapon in her hand, she turns into a ham radio that suddenly appears in the room and repeats the coordinates there twice before she killed her father and sacrificed the girl. Okay, that doesn't mean anything to me. Anyway, yeah, so I mean, the catch is, if Bagul, obviously, this fight would have to take place in the real world, and Bagul has obviously, in a scenario where Bagul has obviously entered the real world, or our world at any rate. And then maybe Babadook is terrorizing a family, and he wants that family, the kid's soul as well. These two go head to head. The immediate problem is we've seen that the Babadook can be beaten very easy, actually. But that, to be fair, we don't know how the Babadook fares against other supernatural entities, just as we don't know how Bagul fares against other supernatural entities. What we do know is that Bagul does have a larger variety of abilities compared to the Babadook. They both have similar abilities, including invisibility, manipulation, shape-shifting, but Bagul also has soul absorption. He can teleport between worlds, psychological tactic, well, Babadook has that, black magic, superhuman strength, death inducement. So he has many other abilities that Babadook just doesn't have. In fact, every ability that Babadook has, save for possession, Bagul has on at least an equal or greater scale. So supernaturally speaking, these two might try to duke it out and manipulate each other, but Bagul is apparently far older and far more ancient than he's back from the ancient Babylonians, for God's sake. So yeah, I mean, and that's thousands of years ago, and he was probably around even before then, because demons are a very obscure bunch for how long they've been around. But ultimately, this would probably be them throwing their best hits at each other, but ultimately, Babadook's power starts to wane against someone who is equal or greater to him in strength, and therefore, I'd go with Bagul in this fight. Ultimately, to really just sum it all up. But basically, it's anything you can do, I can do better with Bagul. Add on the fact that except for the possession, Bagul can do everything Babadook can do except better. And even with the possession, it's not like Babadook's going to try to possess Bagul, because he possessed the mom after she was pretty much just, he was basically psychologically wearing her down so she would be weak enough for him to possess. That's the thing. But you don't become possessed if you're very strong of spirit or will. You become possessed when you're pretty weak and broken down. And yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's one of those things where we don't know the full scope of what these guys can do, nor do we know actually the full scope of their weaknesses. We know a better understanding of the Babadook's weaknesses than we do Bagul's. I mean, truth be told, Bagul probably has weaknesses. No deity, at least as it's usually presented, is infallible. There's usually, because Bagul obviously he feeds on souls. He feeds on the souls of children, but he can only enter our world, for instance, through visual images of himself. If you were to, in theory, get rid of every visual image of him, you could, in theory, kill him, or at least prevent him from ever entering our world again. But that would take a lot of effort, and there's probably old Babylonian images and like books and text of him from long ago that will eventually lead him into, the world. Like, I actually, because if they ever did a third Sinister, that could be a cool thing where it's like they thought they got rid of all the books, but there's one ancient book left, and they see these ink drawings of him. And when they look away as they're talking, the ink drawings start to move, and they start to manipulate reality a little bit and bring himself back into the world. That could be a cool little, at least a scene. But, yeah, Bagul, I think, takes this fight. Who do you got, though? You got Bagul, you got Babadook. You got the big B, you got the little B, you got the Bidoock, or you got the, there's the Pokemon name, Bidoock. I got Bagul. I choose you, Bagul, eat his soul. What? Is it, you heard me, my Bagul's gonna eat your soul. What, Bagul? Ah! Anyway, I digress. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hit that bell if you want to be notified. And I'll catch you folks next time. Have a good one.